Therefore, fundamentally, Taoism has never been a speculative philosophy akin to that of ancient Greece, but rather a miraculous practice for elevating life's level. You might have heard that there are two kinds of Taoism, the so-called Philosophical Taoism and the Religious Taoism. And the latter one is often thought to be something only has the same name but differs from the original Taoism very drastically. However, for Taoist cultivators, this view misunderstands something very essential about Taoism, and this is what this video is trying to introduce. But before we dive into the cultivators' take on Taoism, let's quickly talk about the common understanding, just to give folks that are not that familiar a more complete story. In common understanding, philosophical Taoism, or early Taoism, is often seen as one of the major philosophical schools that emerged during the China's pre-Qing era. This is before 221 BCE, and the founder of early Taoism is often thought to be Lao Tzu. Comparable to the diverse philosophical schools of ancient Greece, like those founded by Plato, Aristotle, and Stoics, and so on, Taoism has a significant place in Chinese philosophy. Taoism suggests that the Tao, or the way, is the root of everything. All complexities in the world originate from this singular source. This belief is why it's called Taoism. The term reflects the view that the Tao, as the root and governing principles of all things, should be emulated. Daoist advocates for an effortless approach to life, advising individuals and communities to let the natural order guide their actions. On the other hand, religious Taoism came into being much later, during the late Eastern Han Dynasty, which is roughly around 200 AD, hundreds of years after the philosophical root took hold. This form of Taoism transforms Lao Tzu, earlier, into a divine figure, the Supreme Lord Lao, and worships him. Although it shares the Daoist label, religious Taoism to many people often feels like a departure from the philosophical principles of its predecessors. Religious Taoism delves into practices such as using talismans for healing, making elixir of immortality, and pursuing spiritual ascension, themes that seem absent in the foundational Daoist text, the Tao Te Ching. This has led many, both in China and abroad, who aren't deeply familiar with Daoist practices, to view religious Taoism as an offshoot that only focuses more on the supernatural elements. However, if you're a Taoist cultivator, you will understand that this view doesn't capture the full picture. Today, we're going to offer you the view of how Daoist cultivators see early Taoism and the later religious Taoism. By the end of this video, you will learn how early and religious Taoism not only share common roots, but also prioritize Daoist cultivation as their core, a practice aimed to elevating the essence of life. The common misconception that early and religious Taoism are drastically different comes from an assumption that Taoism pre-Qing dynasty is purely a philosophy. This view, however, may not be entirely accurate, and often misinterprets Taoism through the lens of Greek philosophy, applying its principles universally. For the purpose of accuracy, we will no longer use the term philosophical Taoism, and will be using pre-Qing or early Taoism as our term. Firstly, it's essential to recognize that Taoism does not merely teach philosophy, but rather reveals the essence of the world, including theories and practices for elevating life's essence. While this includes philosophical elements, philosophy is not all there is to Taoism. We can understand this by looking at the various schools from the pre-Qing era. In fact, These early thinkers were not merely philosophers too. Although often compared to Greek philosophers, their teachings were fundamentally different. The doctrines of these preaching schools had strong practical implication and were a blend of thought and action. For instance, Mohi's teachings combine Mohi's thought with engineering and practices. Legalist teachings integrated legalist theories with administrative and state governance theories. Agriculturalist teachings merge agriculturalist thoughts with agricultural techniques and practices. These doctrines all carried significant practical relevance and embody the belief in the unity between heaven and humanity. Daoism, naturally, also integrated the cultivation of Tao, which is the practice, and the Daoist theories. In fact, both Dao De Jing and Zhuangzi discuss cultivation extensively, which even delve into specific practices. These texts are profound, interpretable on many levels, so viewing them solely as philosophy might seem sufficient, but is ultimately incomplete. Dao De Jing and Zhuangzi both mentioned one of the fundamental methods of cultivation, which is breathing techniques. If one has the lineage of cultivation, they can grasp its essence. For example, Dao De Jing in chapter 29 states, "Thus, things sometimes blow and sometimes puff. 浮物或虚或吹." Here, blow and puff refer to two specific breathing techniques. These techniques adjust the state of one's body, or 形, which is the form, and thereby regulate one's qi, which is energy, and shen, which is the spirit. With prolonged practice, one can unlock the secrets at the core of life. Using these two different breathing techniques, blow and puff, one can adjust their frequency of their meridians. Xu or blow can quickly warm and nourish body, while cui or puff can rapidly cool and release heat from the body. This is another sophisticated application within the cultivation, which is called yang fire and yin talisman in the Taoist internal alchemy. Furthermore, Zhuangzi's great master mentioned, "The true ancients slept without dreaming and woke without worries. Their food was plain and their breath was deep. The breath of a true person rises from their heels, whereas ordinary people breathe from their throats." For many people, their reaction is probably like, breathing from the heels? How can one breathe from their heels? This too is one of the profound mysteries of Taoist cultivation techniques. As cultivation deepens, the body and mind gradually reverts to an unspoiled state, attuning and connecting to heaven and earth, and developing astonishing capabilities beyond ordinary human understanding. When the practice of breathing techniques is mastered, the meridians throughout the body are fully interconnected, functioning like a network that links the whole body. With each breath, the body's fascias systematically expand and contract. Although it seems like a simple act of breathing through mouth and nose affecting the chest, the coordinated action can extend to the extremities of the body. In advanced stages, you can even feel tidal-like changes through touching during cultivators' breathing. Thus, for the cultivators, the wisdom in the Dao De Jing and Zhuangzi is not merely intellectual speculation, but involves a full body experience, integrating xing, or the form, qi, or the energy, and shen, or the spirit. It transcends mere mental activities, encouraging thinking with the heart, beyond the heart with the body, and beyond the body with the whole cosmos. Before we continue, if you think our content brings you new insights, please hit the like to support us. If you want to learn more about authentic Taoism, please subscribe us. Meanwhile, if you have questions or anything you would like to know about Taoism, please let us know in the comments below. We're dedicated to introduce Taoism to the international community. Additionally, Taoism, over the long course of ancient Chinese history, has been referred to by another name, the school of Huang-Lao, which means the teaching of the Huangdi, or the Yellow Emperor, and Laozi. Many are familiar with Laozi through the renowned text, the Daoism, but what about the teachings of the Yellow Emperor? If you're acquainted with the system of traditional Chinese medicine, you will probably recognize the foundational text, the Huangdi Neijing, or the Yellow Emperor's Classics of Medicine. However, if you think that this is merely a medical text, you'd be greatly mistaken. The first chapter of Huangdi Neijing, which is the treatise on the natural truth of antiquity, explicitly states, in ancient times, there were true men who held up the heavens and earth, grasped yin and yang, breathed the essential qi, stood alone and guarded their spirit, their muscles and flesh as one. Thus they could outlive the heavens and earth without an end to their time. This is the Tao of life they followed. These true men understood and mastered the way of heaven and earth, achieved longevity and visionary state. This is indeed the miraculous state achieved by cultivators. Therefore, fundamentally, Taoism has never been a speculative philosophy akin to that of ancient Greece, but rather a miraculous practice for elevating life's levels. After perceiving and understanding the profound mystery of a world from a sufficient height, the teachings naturally carried a wealth of philosophical depth. When we realize that early Taoism itself is a practice transcending life's existential level, we can begin to understand the connection to religious Taoism. Essentially, religious Taoism is just one form of Taoist practice and a unique organizational format. Many criticize Taoism for adopting Daoist principles into a system of theistic beliefs. This criticism comes from the perception that Taoism has degenerated from venerating the fundamental Tao and its natural laws to worshipping various anthropomorphic deities, moving from a rational state to idol worship. This viewpoint is understandable, but arises from a lack of deeper insights into the Daoist theist system. While it appears that Taoism worships anthropomorphic deities, it is actually the universal laws behind the deities that are worshipped, but not the deities themselves. For instance, the highest gods in Taoism, the Sanqing, or the three pure ones, Yuqing, the jade pure, Shangqing, the upper pure, the Taiqing, the great pure, represent the three fundamental principles of Daoist cosmology. Yuqing symbolizes creation, corresponding to the phrase, the Tao engenders one. Shangqing represents the dynamics of existence and succession, reflecting one gives birth to two. Taiqing embodies enlightenment and development, denoting two gives birth to three. When these three fundamental principles of Tao come together, three gives birth to everything, creating the rich diversity of our world. So, why personify these principles? Personification makes these complex concepts accessible to the vast majority, who, in ancient times, had no opportunity for formal education and were busy with daily survival. In the ancient world, not just in China, but globally, education was a privilege of the elite few. The mystical and wise teachings of Laozi's Daoism, which is challenging for even modern educated minds to grasp, would have been incomprehensible to the common people in ancient time. They might find it hard to grasp the concepts of principles, but could relate to the authoritative figures and deified saints worshipped in their communities. Taoist tradition has always emphasized the elevation of all sentient beings, which is why the Theistic system in Daoism developed. Belief in these deities essentially represents a reverence for the various levels of universal principles. Therefore, with sufficient understanding of Daoism, one realizes that at its core, the so-called theistic beliefs in Daoism truly reflects a reiteration of Daoist lineage, aiming at benefiting all sentient beings. This is expressed in the saying, "Set forth the teachings through the gods, to universally enlighten the people." As modern education becomes more accessible, the need for theistic beliefs has diminished, which is why we in Shengxuan Daoism no longer advocate for a system of deities. Compared to early Daoism, Religious Taoism has an institutionalized organizational structure. Its formation as an organized religious community is often why some people think Religious Taoism is unrelated to early Taoism. However, the essence of the institutionalization is simply that Religious Taoism represents a unique form of organizational structure within the Daoist tradition. In fact, founders or pivotal figures of various renowned Daoist sectors are fundamentally Daoist cultivators, and they are often revered as ancestral master or the ancestral teachers. For instance, Zhang Daoling, the founding ancestral masters of the Tianshi Dao, or the way of the celestial masters, cultivated the great elixir of dragon and tiger at the Heming mountain to aid the world and respond to the chaotic historical context of war and displacement of his time. He founded the way of the celestial masters, organized a religious community, and established 24 jurisdictions to bring order to the chaotic times. As a cultivator, Zhang Daoling accumulated sufficient gongde, or the merit and virtue, ultimately achieving transcendence. Daoist cultivation believes that if an individual wishes to elevate their essential existence and achieve transcendence, they need to teach the Tao to enlighten and benefit sentient beings. In helping more people, cultivators will break through their own confines. By enhancing the world's possibility, the cultivators could elevate their own possibility, which is essential for transcendence. This aligns with the Daoist principles from the Dao De Jing, which says, by being selfless, one can fulfill their own selfishness. The so-called selfishness refers to the desire for personal cultivation and transcendence, while selflessness, in contrast, involves benefiting all sentient beings and uplifting the world. Only through selflessness, one's selfishness will be possible. Therefore, the institutionalization of Daoism can also be seen as a special method chosen by the ancestral masters during particular historical periods to benefit all sentient beings. Its core still comes from Daoist cultivation and is consistent with Daoist tradition that has been passed down since the pre-Qing era. Moreover, in Daoist system of cultivation, the distinction between what is inside the body and what is outside is not as clear as ordinary people might perceive. So teaching Daoism in the world is connecting with cultivating one's own being, which is supposedly inside. This touches upon the Huang-Lao teachings of the body as the state and the state as the body, reflecting different stages of cultivation logic. We will explore this topic further in the future discussions if you're interested. So please let us know in the comments. Of course, traditional institutional form have their problems. Their organizational structure is very similar to the secretive artisanal lineage system, where the teachings are strictly and secretly passed down through master-disciple lineage. However, in today's world, where basic education is widespread and the school system is well developed, the traditional model of religious organizations may no longer be the most beneficial for all sentient beings. As an organization dedicated to bringing cultivation's practices to diverse cultural groups worldwide, we, the Shengxuan Daoism, will explore and develop methods suited to our era. We have outlined the characteristics and differences between early Daoism and religious Daoism, revealing the true secrets of Daoism, which is cultivation. However, due to time constraints, a lot of topics have not been fully discussed. Please let us know in the comments below what you would like to hear about Daoism. If you think our content brings you new insights, please hit like to support us. If you want to learn more about authentic Daoism, please subscribe us. In summary, while early Daoism and religious Daoism differ chronologically and in forms of organizations, they are fundamentally consistent. Both agree that the practice of Tao is about elevating and transcending existential states, and they recognize the Tao as the source of all creation. Therefore, Taoist culture has always been a system of exploring, understanding, and practicing to achieve life's elevation.